From flooding issues in Charleston to the recent slavery resolution, I sit down one-on-one with City of Charleston Councilman William Dudley Gregorie for a special edition of Quintin's Close-Ups. And be sure to download the free Quintin's Close-Ups app in your Apple or Google Play stores, or listen to this interview later on the free iHeartRadio app. Well, Councilman Gregorie.
How are you?
I'm doing great, actually.
Good.
It's so good to see you again.
Good seeing you also. I know it took a while to get me here, but
I know you've been extremely busy.
busy trying to avoid work.
Right? At this point, you deserve it.
Yes.
You've been busy with the Emmanuel anniversary,
Yes.
as well as the slavery resolution.
Yes.
What is it like for you to be William Dudley Gregorie?
Incredible. I hope I'm in my purpose. I follow my inner voice, and so far it's led me to great places.
Let me turn you to the new fire chief, Daniel Courier. He's the new fire chief for the City of Charleston. What is it like for you to see him here in that particular role?
It's refreshing. Not only the fire chief, but we also have a new police chief.
Right.
And I think it's always good to bring fresh and new blood into an organization, fresh pair of eyes. So I think it's a good thing. Looking forward to working with them.
That's so good to hear. Let me turn you to an article from the Post-Courier just recently. This is from July 23rd. Residents asking feds to investigate Charleston for failure to protect against flood risks. Obviously, city spokesperson, that is, Jack O'Toole, told the Post-Courier this, that he thinks the city's rating is likely to improve, if anything, because of the ongoing efforts to address flooding. Tell me, how is the city improving with that?
It's the water stupid. And that's been my mantra, and that will be my mantra throughout my career as a city councilman. It has to be the number one priority of this city. Growing up in this city, the flooding became a way of life. We know how to dodge them and avoid them, as a child, and even now as an adult. Things are getting worse, and I do think that the approach that our city is using is the best one that we could use at this time. We've hired a resiliency officer. We are trying to pull together monies to do additional drainage projects. I think sometimes people forget, first of all, the cost, and secondly, there are things that the city is currently doing. All my life it flooded at President and Fishburne Street. It flooded at Ashley and Sumter Street. Today, just with the amount of work that they have done regarding drainage on the Septima Clark Drainage Project, it has substantially decreased the flooding at those two major intersections. These are the kinds of stories that no one ever really talks about in terms of the kind of progress that is being made. Is that enough? No. It's not enough because we don't have enough money. It's going to take a couple $2 billion to correct the flooding throughout the city of Charleston. And I feel that this council is making it a priority by clearly instructing our public service division to rewrite the stormwater management manual, to update it and to go the extra mile beyond what the state and federal requirements would be, because the city of Charleston is a little unique a city in terms of the amount of flooding that occurs. So what we need to do is go beyond the current standards, and I'm hoping that once we've completed that stormwater manual, I would make things better. But there are things that we can do right now, okay? If the drain in your sink was stopped up, you'd unclog it. Simple. If we have ditches that just simply need to be cleaned so that the water can flow properly, let's do it. Anything that we could do in terms of maintenance, okay, in terms of maintenance, I think we need to start upgrading our maintenance. And I think that our director of public service is doing that. We've hired 4 more people just specifically to deal with the ditch issues on your James and your Johns Island, which we think is part of the major issue, the maintenance of the ditches. We're trying to have a coordinated effort between the state, the county, the city, and on James Island, the town of James Island, the PSD, because in multiple jurisdictions. Right. So that, you know, we can't continue to use, it's not city responsibility, it's county responsibility. The county said it's not the county, it's the city. We need to pull all that together and clean these damn ditches, because that's all it needs in many cases. It's just cleaning. Remove the blockage. I've walked many ditches throughout this city, and I know that some of the remedies are pretty simple, and those are the simple I think we should do. We should do it now.
You talk about a couple of things. September Parkway, you talked about upgrades. Let me take you to the area where a couple of accidents happened, some of it tragic. I know the city's improving the way that pedestrians move about that area. When you look at that, what goes to your mind?
Well, the 17 o'clock Parkway, to me, has always been a scar in our city. A scar in that it separated neighborhoods. I do think, however, the improvements to it, to make it a parkway, to give it a different flavor is good, but that's window dressing. We need to deal with the safety issues at 17 o'clock Parkway. And just recently, under the direction of our new Director of Traffic and Transportation, he is in fact implementing, I think, some sort of logical fixes. And I think what we're doing at Cumming in the 17 o'clock Parkway will save lives, because no longer will people have to wait 2 stoplights to cross the 17 o'clock Parkway. So I think that the kinds of simple, logical fixes, not just at the 17 o'clock Parkway and Cumming, but many of the areas that are prone to accidents, we need to start thinking about fixing them so that we can protect all the residents of the city.
Let me take you to the Charleston City Market. Obviously, there was an incident with one of the Rose kids and the Charleston City police officer on July 2nd, I believe.
Yeah.
When you look back to that to right now, what plays in your mind?
I mean, first of all, we've got to call it what it is. He was not a Rose kid. The Rose children are licensed and permitted, okay? Unfortunately, the young man was not a part of our Rose program, okay? And he was confronted because peddling is illegal in the city of Charleston, period, not just for the Rose kids. If we didn't have those kinds of laws in place, we would have people selling Rolex on the corners all over the place. So it's always been very, very important for us as a city to make sure that our children, who will be the future entrepreneurs of our city, are trained, and our Rose Chill kids are trained and permitted. And what I don't want to see happen is that this program is scarred by people who are not just simply following the rules. While I think that we can make some improvements to the program to make things a little more accessible to the children in terms of restricting them to certain areas to sell, If we can come up with a way to either increase those areas somehow, or be able to control them in such a way that they're not infringing upon the rights of the tourists and the businesses, then I think that we should do that, and do that quickly.
And you talk about the city market, and you talk about obviously areas of Charleston. Let me take you to the headline from Channel 5, July 25th. City of Charleston wants to limit hotel rooms while growing in other areas. Tell me why now.
The City of Charleston wants to limit the number of hotel rooms with a headline. If that's a headline, I'm not aware of that. We have not taken any action in council to limit the number of rooms in hotels. If there are specific numbers, those specific numbers are tied to the current zoning ordinances. Now, there have been hotels that wanted to increase the number of rooms that they can put on a specific site, and something like that would have to go before our planning commission and also come before council.
Right.
That has not happened all the time, okay? But there is one hotel, I think it's at Market Street, that has been running into some issues with the neighborhoods, etc. But I think all that's been worked out. And I think there was a request to increase the number of rooms for that hotel. I don't know where that finally settled out, but as long as the councilman from that area, which was Mr. White, Councilman White, was satisfied with it, then I'm satisfied with the results.
And let me go a little bit further back to Juneteenth. Obviously the day that the City of Charleston, obviously approved that slavery resolution. Is there one particular thing that you would include in that resolution if you were to go back and vote for that?
I mean, differently?
Yes, sir.
What people don't know is how much negotiation went into every single word in that document. If I had my druthers, yes, there would have been additional things in there. But however, what was most important for me was to make sure that we recognize our role in slavery, and that we denounce it and we apologize for it. Now, as to whether or not that apology can go further, of course, but I think that's going to depend upon us. The apology is just the beginning. And I don't think that we can move forward in racial reconciliation without at least acknowledging the problem, and where we felt our city was a part of that problem, apologize accordingly so that we can move forward. And by moving forward, what I mean is, one, determine where systemic discrimination exists, particularly in our city. Because systemic discrimination is written in subtly into laws, ordinances, covenants of particular HOAs. It's all over the place. So what is important to me is for us to establish a mechanism to identify those discriminatory practices that are still in existence today, and be able to call I hate to use the word predator, but call the person who is responsible for enforcing those rules to change those rules. We've been talking more about an apology for slavery, but that apology goes further. It also apologizes for Jim Crow. And I do think that if we were able to talk to some of my council members about an era that they were a part of, which is the Jim Crow era, perhaps they would think about this a little differently. Because I know where talking about an apology for slavery, but Jim Crow grew out of slavery. And Jim Crow is more current, more contemporary. What I wish I had done during the discussions with my fellow council members is to bring the discussion into our time. Bring the discussion into a time when we all were children and we knew about the separate but equal. Our parents knew about it. White Americans knew about it. They lived it. So people that are my age on council, I think, would be able to relate a little more to the Jim Crow era because in essence they were a part of it. Okay. They lived it. Okay, they experienced it. They knew about the colored-only bathrooms and the separation there. They knew about the separation of the races. They knew about the inferiorities in our schools. They lived it. This is a part of them, okay? This has nothing to do with their forefathers, okay? This has anybody that's in their 60s or their 70s, okay, clearly understands Jim Crow and how harmful that was to African Americans in this country. So I think if we start changing the discussion, just not on slavery, but what resulted once slavery was abolished, to keep up the kind of abuse of a people, perhaps they'll be able to relate to it a little different.
What are those discriminatory practices right now in your mind?
Discrimination now is done with a smile, okay? You can't recognize it. It's very, very subtle. There are things that sometimes happen in city council, okay, that I don't think that people even recognize. For instance, if I make a suggestion on something, it may not be taken the same way as if someone who's not African American makes the same statement, okay, and it's accepted. I've said often in city council, oh, his ice is colder than my ice. And what I simply mean by that is, okay, that because it's coming from me, okay, an African American, it's looked at a lot differently than when it's coming from a white person. So that white person's ice is colder than mine. We both have ice. Both of them keep things cool, okay? But theirs sometimes must be colder than mine because what is accepted, okay, is different than what is accepted from me. So racism is very, very subtle. It's very micro now. It's not as blatant as it was in the past. It has evolved into discriminating with a smile. So you'll never even know that you're being discriminated against. And those are the kinds of things that we need to start dealing with, okay, as a city.
And you talk about the city, you talk about racism, and I know a lot of people in this town know that your particular church, Emmanuel AME Church, dealt with racism, and just recently you celebrated your 200th anniversary.
Yes, we did.
Where are you emotionally with that?
For any African American institution to survive for 200 years in this country is an unbelievable feat. A church that has gone through every struggle that any African American church has gone through. For me, it's amazing. I'm elated. And I'm hoping that our church continue to be on the forefront of many of the issues that we're discussing today. Flooding doesn't have a color, okay? Flooding affects every single person on this peninsula. But what's most important is that one area, since we're going back to subtle, okay, discrimination, one area is being served and another area is not being served. Both have the same degree of a problem with regard to flooding. So as a council member, we've got to be very, very careful when we make decisions. And those decisions, while not intentionally, has a negative impact on a specific group of people. I don't think that today discrimination is always intentional. I really don't. But I do think that the results of certain actions can have a discriminatory impact on a specific group of people, be they gay, lesbian, African American, male, female, okay? It can. So we have to make sure that when we make decisions, and this is where this apology is going to be forcing us to look into our legislation to make sure that any ordinance or legislation that we put forward does not have a negative impact upon any specific group of people. That's our mission as a council, and that should be our responsibility as a council. While it might not be intentional, the impact of our actions could have a discriminatory impact on specific populations. So the apology, to me, makes us conscious of those things, much more conscious. Some of the issues that were raised by Councilmember Waring, okay, who did not support the apology, were sound issues that may in fact have a discriminatory impact on a specific group of people. I understood clearly, okay, his issues, while I would not necessarily agree with the fact that he should vote for it, but I did agree, I understood his concerns, I really did. And those are the kinds of subtle things that he was talking about, the micro things that have an impact, a negative impact on certain people.
William Dudley Gregorie, thank you so much for your time. I really, really appreciate
Okay,
this.
thank you. Always good to see you.
Likewise.
Okay, bye-bye.